We're happy to introduce a new product today. It actually replaces our hoop-de-doo. The hoop-de-doo was amazing for the time, but for this particular technique, you need a little bit different product to actually hold the stabilizer in your hoop. It's a heat-activated, moldable material, and it actually feels like felt. So it molds to what you're working on, which is exactly what we need for the hoop. So we have the felt, and I'm going to take a pressing cloth. You don't want to put your iron straight on it. And we're going to press. And see how it's kind of scrunching? And see how it's shrinking up? And it will continue to shrink. All right, we're going to turn it over and shrink it from the other side. And what it ends up like is the felt that they use for, or the interfacing that they use for making those bowls. I mean, years ago, I don't know if you all do them anymore, but the bowls. And as you can see, it actually presses to a very stiff and wonderful moldable piece of felt is all I can call it, but it's just incredible. And go ahead and press that down. You can see how it gets nice and stiff, and you can still pin into it. So it works really well. The new product is called Fosshape 300, and we're actually selling it through my daughter's website, which is Purple Daisies. There'll be a link that shows up. You can order it in a half a yard, and it's 45 inches wide, and that should do quite a bit of your hoops. It's probably the best thing that I've ever used for my embroidery, and it really makes a huge difference. So we want to start with the hoop and get it, relatively clean. I use a 1/2 inch double-sided tape, and my daughter also is going to carry that on her website. And we want to put the tape on the ends. If your hoop has that. Most of them do have a stabilization down at the ends, but you want to make sure you put tape down there. And probably one would have been more than enough. It's not like the old hoop-de-doo. You're actually trying to mold something that wasn't moldable with that one. We just need to be able to get the felt to hold to the hoop long enough for us to mold it. And oh my goodness, when I found this stuff, I was so excited. It really, really is what we needed all the time. Museums use it to make mannequins. If they're doing like exhibits of famous clothing, they'll actually form it. They use the 600 for that, but they form it to a mannequin, and then they'll hang the clothing in the museum. Now, don't take the tape off yet. We've got to tape all the way around the outside. And the reason that I do this is because it just takes too much for me to hold all the edges. I don't have 6 hands. So the tape holds it. And you want a good tape. You don't want it to be, kind of sticky. You want it really sticky. But it's double-sided tape, and I'm going all the way around. So we want to take the backing off the tape on the back side, not on the sides yet, just on the back. So we take the paper off. Now when I discovered, or even I should put it that when I ordered it, I had absolutely no idea the actual texture of the product, and it was really kind of scary because I wasn't really sure if it would work. And it's, I just don't like getting junk in, basically. And it's a felt, so you can kind of see how thick it is. It's not the thickest they have. They have a 600 for like the mannequins if you're going to make something like that. And we only need the 300. So I have the felt here, and we've taken the tape off, and I want to make sure that I have at least an inch around the whole thing. We want to put it down like that. Okay, and turn it over and press it with your hands. We want it stuck on there. And the tape isn't really going to do anything other than hold it while I'm molding it to the hoop. I've got the tape, the paper on the tape that we put on the outside edge. And I'm not cutting it to shape, and there's a reason why. This gives me a handle to hold on to. You will eventually cut it out, but for right now, we don't want to do that. So I'm pulling it up, and we don't want to put the hoop on yet because you've got to get this stiff before you put the other part of the hoop on. You can see how it's kind of sticking. It's not really doing much of it. I have a plug is what we call it. It's just that foam insulation that you can buy in sheets, and I covered it with canvas, and it's been years, so it looks kind of like this, you know, because of use. We're going to use that next after we set the center. So we want to have the piece, we want to stabilize everything by pressing the center. So I'm just going to use the pressing cloth on it. Don't try it without a pressing cloth. I've also tried it with those Teflon-y kind of pressing cloths, and the heat doesn't actually react as positive with it. So I just like a cloth. It's just easy. It's a piece of muslin. So I did a little bit of pressing, and I want to do a little bit more. And what this does is it just stabilizes it so you can't really stretch it in the center anymore. Okay. You can see how it's really gotten solid. I'm also going to do the back side. So that's what we need. That it's a pressing plug. And it's really easy to make. All you do is just use your template, your plastic template that comes with the hoops, and that's the shape you need to cut it in, and just cover it with batting and some canvas. So we've got it on the back side. You can also just fold up a towel. You just want it to be as level on top with the actual hoop. You can see it kind of scrunches. That's the felt shrinking. This stuff is so amazing. It really is. Okay, so we pull it off and then do it again so that it will become solid. There we go. So the next step is we want to mold it to the hoop shape. So you want to mold it up around to get the same shape as the hoop. If you were to not shape it and just go ahead and hoop it, it will fall apart on you with the strain of the embroidery. So you want to make sure that you shrink it, and you can see how it's actually molding to the hoop. Let's try it this way. This might be a little bit easier. We want to go around the corner. Yeah, that is easier. That's not hard, is it? I'm going to go ahead and finish this up and be back in a few minutes. We're going to put our hoop on. And one of the reasons why I use a product like this is that I have tremors, and they're pretty severe, the trimmers. To get something really, really tight, it's almost impossible for me. I have to get my son to come tighten all the hinges. And so we want to make sure that your hoop is level all the way around, because if you don't get it level, it kind of wobbles on the machine. So I've got it nice and level. At this point, I like to kind of inspect the back side, because once the ring is put onto your hoop, you want to check the bottom. And you can actually kind of see this is part right here is felty and this is solid. If it has any kind of a felty and not a solid edge, you want to go ahead and press it again until it looks like, well, the only thing I can say it looks like is the stuff they use for those bowls. It's a very stiff interfacing that you can sew through. But you want to make sure that it is pressed where it's really hard. And one of the things that I worried about with this is the actual pins that I have to use for the water soluble. When I use just regular interfacing on it, it's stiff enough to hold itself so I can just glue it down without pinning. But the water soluble stabilizer has to be pinned. And I was really worried that it wasn't going to be soft enough that I could actually put pins in, but it is absolutely perfect. There's no problem. All right, so I'm getting this pressed down really nicely. I want to repeat the process on the center. And you can see where it's kind of felty. It has a little fuzz on the finish. And if it has that, you've got to get rid of that. So it's really important to press it down. There we go. Now I know this seems like a little bit of work, where you can just hoop and you're done. What happens with this is it gives you complete control of your stabilizer. You can get the right tension on it. You don't have it flip-flopping anywhere. So it's really important to have a consistent tension on the water-soluble stabilizer so that it doesn't pull from the sides. If it pulls from the sides, when it does the really fine lines, it's not going to line up correctly. So you've got to make sure that you have it to where it's going to be stitching where it's supposed to stitch and not off a little bit, because the things are moving around. You can see how I've got this extra. The key to this process is this step. I'm going to press that to give it a actual ledge on the edge. What happens with that is that it won't pull out of the hoop. If you've got a ledge right there of the felt, you can see how I've got a ledge, and then we're going to cut it just to the outside, and that is what holds everything inside the hoop. You can't get it won't move with that ledge. It's like putting your hands on a window and trying to pull it down. If your hands were straight, you wouldn't get anything done. This gives the hoop the stability that it needs to actually hold onto the stabilizer and not shift at all in the process of embroidery. And use your test, see if it's felty, then you know to go back and make it solid. And it turns into just this really nice edge that, I can't even tell you how much I love this stuff. It made the actually doing the pieces possible, because I could actually create a stable environment for the stitching for the machine. Can you see how it's edged really nicely? And so we want to go ahead and finish that up all the way around. And I will really take my time on it, because that's the important part. You can get it molded to the hoop, but if you don't put this ledge on it, it's not going to hold as nicely as it should. And I'm sure you can all visualize why this is a big deal. Now, when you're working with a hoop, your weakest point is right here. So you want to make sure that you have plenty of the felt so that it will hold that stress point very consistently for your stitching. And engineering-wise, that really makes sense, I hope. For me, it really did. We didn't have that option with a hoop-de-doo at all. You couldn't do that, and this just gives it so much more strength. The next thing you want to do is to go ahead and cut the outside edge on it. There are a couple of ways you can do it. You can just cut it like I'm doing now, which is just fine, but I'm a bit impatient kind of personality. So I would actually just turn it upside down and use a razor blade to cut all this extra off. But either way that works for you. Just make sure you don't cut that ledge off. And I'm sure that makes sense. What you're doing right here is it gives you the option. All of the tension actually is established within this step. Having the tension in your stabilizer is the easy part compared to this. Inside the center here, you have to cut that out. You can't really sew through this. And how I do it, whatever machine you have, there's a stitchable field. And I put a basting stitch all the way around, then I just cut out the center. So once I get done here, I can show you that. But you want that stitching field open. If you don't have that option, it's a 1/4 inch here from the side, and it is just about 3/4 of an inch on the end. So you can go a 1/4 inch all the way around and cut that hole out. What I'm doing here is checking the ledge. This area right here is fine, but this is kind of sticking up a little bit. And if it kind of sticks up, it just means you need to press it more. So I will go over it 2 or 3 times to get it as rock hard as I possibly can. And before you move it, you want to just let it cool. Okay. There, that's much better. The next thing you'll do is to cut out the center. Remember to leave a 1/4 of an inch and about a 1/2 inch on the ends. And I'm going to go get the other hoop that I've already set up. So I have 2 hoops, and one the center has already been cut out. And instead of going through the whole process of stitching out the outline, you can just cut on this line. We're going to trace it, and my son's going to cut it out for me. Okay, so we've cut that center out, and we want to press again. And it's really important to get the fluff or the furriness off of the piece. You want it as hard as you can get. And just putting the stabilizer on actually will press this. You don't need to be too worried about it. It's that ledge and the sides that really make the big difference. So there we are. And as you can see, it will hold itself in the hoop because of the little ledge here. So we have the wrong side up, and I've cut the stabilizer to where it is, just about 2 fingers, maybe 1.5 inches bigger than the space in the middle. So I don't have a whole lot of waste, which is really good, really, really good. So we can see that it fits really nicely, and I want to take my Elmer's school glue. You can use the white or the purple, and I found actually that the white works better than the purple. But either way is just fine, and you want to put a good amount of the glue on the felt. You can't do like this. That's not enough. My basic rule on the gluing process is to go over it 3 times. So I go back and forth 3 times, like that, just back and forth. And you want to get enough on the edge where it's solid. Can you see how it's real solid right there? So that's the edge of the hoop. So we want to make sure that we get it nice and solid. Now, the only reason I'm putting this much on is because this is the first time, and the glue actually goes into the felt a little bit. When you've got a glue base, after you pull the stabilizer off after the stitching, you won't have to use quite as much. We use the Vilene water-soluble stabilizer, and it's the only one that I like. I don't mean to be brand specific because I know a lot of you have your own favorites, but this has the strength to actually hold the stitches where they need to be. I've tried them all, and this is the only one that held it correctly. So I put the actual Vilene on, and the glue is kind of holding it. So we want to take, I have these big corsage pins, and I'm putting them at the corners and giving it, you don't want to stretch it too much. You just want to stretch it just lightly. And most of you know how fabric works. And the length of the fabric is a little bit stronger than the width. Well, that also is the case in the stabilizer. So the length of your stabilizer needs to go the length of your hoop. And in a pinch, you just have to know how it's going to stretch. When you stretch it, you can actually feel the cross grain and the length, well, there's no grain, and the length has a different stretch point. So you want to make sure that you're just aware of that. And what happens if you use this and just hoop it is that you don't have any control inside the hoop. You can pull and pull all you want, but once the machine starts stitching, it's going to pull on it too. So you want to make sure that you have the proper approach to actually putting this in the machine. So I'm stretching it, and because I've done the cross, which had quite a bit of stretch in it, it's actually on there very nicely. So I put 3 pins. So you've got a center pin, just like that. And as you work with your hoop, the felt that was put into your hoop actually gets stronger, it gets more matted together with the heat. So at the beginning, it isn't as stiff as you work. So as you're working with it, it gets better, which is so weird. It's just the weirdest thing in the whole world. But we love having a product that actually works properly. So I take the iron and press it down using a pressing cloth. You don't have to worry too much about getting it dry at this point. Just press it down. Then I go ahead and put the glue on for the second layer. You need 2 layers. We tried 1 layer and 2 layers, and the 1 layer was nothing but a mess. So you want to make sure that you have 2 layers of the Vilene water-soluble stabilizer. And I put enough glue. Now the glue that's on the first glue is really not dry yet, so you don't have to put nearly as much. And if you were to use any other kind of glue but Elmer's, it reacts funny with the water soluble. So you want to make sure that you use the Elmer's glue stick, whether it's the white one or the purple, it doesn't really matter. So you want to repeat the process. And the second one, you want to go ahead and pull it with the same tension as the first. And can you see how much control I have with it? I'm not fighting with the hoop, and I mean, it's just an amazing thing. I know that some of you can hoop really, really fast, but can you keep your tension consistent? This way, see how it's kind of buckling right here? I can adjust it. Now, if you had 2 layers and you just hooped it, you wouldn't be able to really adjust each layer individually. And it doesn't take that much time. And if you were to do it just normally, we can't guarantee that those stitches are going to line up because they're so tight. So you've got to have the right tension within the hoop, and this gives you complete control of it. And you want to go over it with the pressing cloth and hit it with the iron again. And you don't have to worry about too much heat. I've got pretty hot iron here, and because the pressing cloth, and I'm not holding it right on it, I'm moving around, it's not getting too hot. Now at this point you want to pull your pins out, and you can use regular T-pins or sewing pins. I just like them a little bit bigger so they're easier to pull out. Take your pressing cloth and you're going to press it again. And what happens with the pins is there's a spot right there that is still a little bit wet. So you want to make sure you go ahead and press it again. And every single time you do this, the felt gets a little bit stronger. And because it's easy on your pins, you usually don't have a problem sticking pins in it at all. And the holes actually kind of close up too, which is really nice. So this is now ready to stitch.